those elements that have really nothing to do with winning basketball games are what really, I think, separates your experience that you're going to get at a place like Calvin and lots of other schools, I think, at the D3 level.
Welcome to another D3 Datacast. Matt, we are in the season lead up. We're weekly, putting shows out every week, counting down the remaining weeks until the official start of the season. It's great, Matt. We're really jumping in this week with a great talk with Calvin men's basketball head coach Bill Sall.
Excited to have Coach Sall join us today, talk about what he expects for the season ahead, some of his players, some of his schedule, what we can expect from the Calvin Knights, who we saw in the Elite Eight last year.
And before we get to Coach Sall, we want to invite everyone who's watching, click the subscribe button. Make sure you're not missing an episode of the D3 Datacast. We're also on social media, whether you call it X or Twitter. We're there at D3 Datacast. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/D3 Datacast. And if you want to support the show beyond just following us and watching and clicking that subscribe button, which is awesome, you can also go to patreon.com/D3 Datacast for more information and all the ways that you can support us there. Without further ado, let's get to our talk with Coach Sall. We're pleased to welcome into the D3 Datacast Big Box Calvin men's basketball head coach Bill Sall, who, believe it or not, it's hard to believe, entering his sixth season now back at Calvin University, a 92-34 record as Calvin head coach. Welcome back to the show, Bill.
Gentlemen, it is great to see you too, and excited to have a chance to talk for a little while.
And this is a second appearance for you, so I think your fees double at this point, so it's becoming a little more expensive to have you on here. But we're glad you took the time.
Well, you know, we've negotiated well. We'll see if that ever gets paid off.
So, Coach, before we jump into this upcoming season, we're all excited about the season here. Let's look back at last year, because you guys had a really special season, a special run. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit here. Another conference championship, second year in a row for you guys. NCAA tournament bid, at-large bid into the tournament, and you made it all the way to the Elite Eight. So it was an incredible run. You went to John Carroll. You won that pod. You beat John Carroll on their home floor. You beat Randolph-Macon at Trinity, and then fell to Trinity in the Elite Eight. I know it's what every coach and player wants to do, get into the tournament and make a deep run like that. But I just want to hear from you. What was that tournament run like for you and the guys to spend those extra weekends together going through the tournament?
You know, it was an incredible experience. It was really neat to see, you know, our team at the end, and again, Elmhurst was our first game. So we played three incredible teams back to back to back, and to play some of our best basketball. Man, they really bought in. You know, it's interesting. These last 3 years, we've got an at-large bid twice, and I think, man, that feeling when you don't quite know if you're in or not, and then you see your name on the board is really special. And I think sometimes when you have, you know, that moment that it might be taken away from you might not actually get in, I think really rejuvenates a team. And I thought we played really some great basketball, rejuvenated basketball. And it was great to see a lot of guys really step up and play incredibly well. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite games is that John Carroll game, just because we were a pretty severe underdog, I think, going into that one, and how well we really played and prepped over the course of, 18, 20 hours from the win against Elmhurst going in that one was just cool to see, and how well we responded in a really adverse situation. So, you know, hats off to our guys. Love that team. Fortunate enough that we got a lot of those guys coming back as we start the year up here.
Yeah, you talk about that tension in the in-between of not knowing, you know, if you're going to get in or not. This past season, you were able to get an at-large bid. You know, the year before, with really a lot of the same personnel, you did not get that bid. So did that make it all the more special to go on that run, having a large percentage of that group come back, finally get that chance to get in, and then, you know, really make something of it?
Oh, certainly. And, you know, I was texting back and forth with Matt. He was like my side counselor as we were waiting for the selection show. And he's like, I think you're good. So I lived with his confidence in our team, because I was not that confident. And, you know, I think it would have been really tough to go 2 summers in a row, having your last game a loss to hope, and then having to spend May, June, July, August, September before you can play again. So yeah, I think the good Lord was looking out for me, because I don't know if I could have handled that.
I knew with how much confidence I was trying to give you, if you didn't make it into that tournament, you were never going to speak to me ever again. So I'm glad that you guys got in, just so I'm staying in somewhat good graces of the program.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. Yeah, it would have been tough to have the next conversation, but no, I'm glad for both of us it worked out.
All right, so the dynamic will change a little bit now going forward with the old regional ranking system going away. We moved to just like a purely numbers-based system with NPI. So, while we were fairly confident in our ability to project the regional rankings and how that would shake out, moving to a new system, Matt will be able to hit that button on the computer and we'll know for sure. I just wondering, as a coach, I know coaches tend to like to have, a bit of control, and so I guess what's your approach or feelings on going to a completely different ranking system and system for determining who gets into, get those precious at-large bids?
Right.
Do you feel like it's just going to be a learning process here in the early years of it, or do you feel like you just can't worry about it and don't really maybe change your approach to a season because of it?
Well, I think first off, listen to your podcast that you had on. It was really interesting. I think I would recommend any coach that's really interested in what this is like to go back and listen to that podcast, because it does really, I think, present it well. I think you can't do anything about it this year, but I do think in years from here on out, how you're going to schedule, what makes more sense. I think like this year, our schedule is really loaded, because again, we were really out searching for those RROs as much as we possibly could. And I don't necessarily think, it's still important to get good wins, but is that such an important piece of the equation, since there really isn't anything as a regionally ranked win? So I think from a scheduling standpoint, yeah, you still want to go against good teams. You want great competition, but also, making sure that you're doing the right thing for your program at the right time.
Yeah, closing the book on this past season, you got a few seniors going out. Marcus Bolt, Matt Ambrose, they were two players that were, Marcus was a starter, Matt was in the rotation. Mitchell Cook, Henry Goldkuhl, kind of bench guys for you. But just love to see guys go out on a high note. Marcus Bolt had a great tournament. Really good to see seniors playing at a high level like that at the end of the season. But you're going to have to turn the page on these guys, some guys that have contributed to the program, and find new guys to kind of step up. So you have a couple of voids there, particularly Marcus's starting spot that you're going to have to look to fill this season, right?
Absolutely. And you're spot on with Marcus. What a great run he had. Played with so much confidence. It was funny the other day. I was watching the John Carroll game again, just to kind of, I usually try to watch about every game we played in sequence before the start of the season. And, I just texted him and said, wow, what a great game. You were so good in every facet. And, I mentioned, would you rather be doing your job right now, or, we have some different types of conditioning drills that we do, and we had it lined up that we're going to do 622s in this last practice, or be on the court and doing 622s. And he was like, honestly, I never thought I'd say this, but give me the 622s, because I'd take it any day of the week. So he had an amazing career, and what a great end to it. But yeah, there's some shoes to fill. When you talk about those other seniors, they all had unique roles, from great guys on a scout team to guys that really were the glue, and really provided some really unique senior leadership. So there's a lot of things that we'll be missing out of that class, and we certainly always appreciate them a ton.
And a big name coming back for you, of course, is Uchenna Egekeza, and it was great to see him. I was pleasantly surprised to see him named to the D3Hoops.com All-American team, because I feel like, no Calvin basketball fan will underappreciate him. He does so much, but it's often in a way that doesn't necessarily show up in a box score. And, so sometimes to get, a national recognition, those guys have a harder time breaking through. So I was pleasantly surprised to see him named, I believe, to the third team.
Yeah.
Just talk about Uchenna and how important it is, having him come back as a cornerstone for this upcoming season.
Well, it's huge. Chen, over the course of his career, really has transformed, what the program was and where it is now. And it's amazing to think about that. He's going to end up being probably close to probably the top 13, maybe top 12 all-time leading scorers in Calvin history. I mean, he's going to absolutely annihilate the steals record here. And he's going to end up top 10 in a lot of other categories. And it's because he just fills up the stat sheet every time, right? And I did love that D3 Hoops named an All-American, because the facts are, we all want to look at, hey, how many points, percentages, all that sort of thing. But you talk about a most valuable type player, he fits it in every type of facet you can imagine. And when you have the best, I think, or one of the best defenders in all Division III, and a guy has 20, and you're saying, all right, yeah, tonight he might get 10. That makes a world of difference in what you can do and where you can go. And his energy that he gives, just not in games, but in practice, is really instrumental in as far as what we do and how we can do things. So it's a joy to be able to get one more year and coach him.
Talking about the other big names on your team last season, Jalen Overway, first team All-America, was a great player. But I think the big topic going into the season from a lot of people's minds nationally is going to be his injury, the injury he suffered against Trinity in the Elite Eight game. I think it was a torn ACL. And it sounds like what I've heard from you, the plan's going to be he's going to take the year medical, rehab the knee, and try to get it right for the future. I guess, how's Jalen doing, and is that still going to be his plan for this season?
At this point, that's what we think we're going to do. He has worked incredibly hard over the summer. And he's about 3 months ahead of schedule. With that being said, statistically, when he went and got consults from 3 separate surgeons about, what does it look like? What's the return to play look like? Just the percentages of chance of re-injuring that or injuring the other knee is up significantly, if you rush it. And so we are going to take every precaution because, again, I think for him, he wants to have, enough reassurance to know that he's going to be able to continue to play and play at a high pace. And, we'll see where it goes. But I would say, right now, we're looking forward to him to being, an awesome 6'10" assistant student coach, and be there for the team. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. I mean, injuries like this are really difficult. But you talk about a kid that's just a gracious, wonderful person. I mean, he's at practice every day and just doing an amazing job of being there with the guys and trying to do as much as he can to try to help us, for sure.
And certainly there's never a good time to lose a player as important as Jalen Overway is to your team. But I imagine it makes a big difference, having this whole offseason, being able to prepare for a season, knowing he's not going to be there, as opposed to having a significant injury early on in the season or mid-season and then having to adjust on the fly. Right. So I'm wondering what's been your approach? Because it's not like you just, next man up and you say, go do the Jalen stuff, because frankly, he's a unicorn. There's not a lot of guys who can go out there and do the Jalen stuff. Right. So what's been the approach? And how do you maybe take advantage of having this advance notice, to prepare for the season?
I don't know how much of an advantage it is, right? I'd rather have, 22 points a game at 60% and 12
Absolutely.
rebounds, and I think sometimes you forget, because of how dominant he was and it demanded a double, sometimes triple team, how many times other players are able to get really, really good looks and really good actions by what he was doing. So, he was a focal point of our offense, right? I mean, I would say 30 possessions, at least a game, he was getting a touch somewhere. So, we've had to change quite a bit. I can tell you this, we've been fortunate enough to have those 8 practices before you get going into the, the 15th of October. It's been huge for us to actually get a little feel for what our guys can do. But we've got a lot of things to figure out. I mean, let me tell you what, I'm glad we're not playing on October the 16th or October the 17th. So it's been good, but very different, right? And I think that adjustment has been really beneficial to have that in. But yeah, I think I'd take him back at any time he'd like to give it a go.
Absolutely.
So as you said, you're gonna have to figure some things out, right? Players are gonna have opportunities to step up and fill roles. If someone wants to
Mhm.
jump up and win playing time or win starting minutes or touches, right? They
Yeah.
have the opportunity right now. So
Right.
we talked about Uchenna. Owen Varnado returns. He was a second team All MIAA player. Luca Ressler has been in the starting lineup for a couple years. Some of those returning starter type players, are you going to rely on them Are you going to ask them to do different things than they've done in the past
Yeah.
with this kind of new opportunity? I guess.
Well, I think a couple of things. First off, some of the things that we've done defensively, we're going to change a little bit. We're going to play with a little more pressure. Um, you know, hopefully be able to use some versatility on the defensive side to mix a few things in. And in a situation like this, and the guys would say the same thing. It's just not like you said, one person can come in and fill that
Mm-hmm.
void. So the returners. I mean, you've got Luca, you've got Owen, of course, Chenna, but then a Trevin Winkle, Trip Reamersma, who played really well down the stretch. Brady Ewing, who got some minutes. Every one of the guys that was kind of in that roster spot slotted, they've got to make themselves another big jump up. So that, again, and I look at the roster and we've talked about this with the team, I really visually see this team instead of being like last year where, Jalen's at about 22 points, Chen's at about 13. And then we had a lot of guys kind of at 8 points per game. This is way more of a thing where, if we could get 5 guys kind of right around double figures in scoring, and then have other guys that are contributing, right around there to get the points we need. And then, there might be one day where one guy it leads us in scoring and the next time someone else. So it is going to be way more by committee. And also, I think minutes will kind of be the same thing where, I mean, Chen's always going to play his 35, 36 minutes because he just plays with such amazing energy. But, we're going to probably have, more depth, but also trying to keep that energy at a really high level.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the depth in those returners like Trevin Winkle, Trip Reamersma, Dane Harvey, Brady Ewing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think from what I've heard on social media, there's also a few transfers coming into the
Yeah.
program. Parker Schwartz, a sophomore student who played D2 at Ohio Dominican last year, I think is
Mm-hmm.
going to be joining the program. James Felton, a graduate student from Davenport, Division II level, joining the program. And Ty Horkey, a graduate student from Kalamazoo, going to be joining the program. So I think that's a lot of depth and experience for you guys that both are as returners and new players. So that's going to be, you're going to got to go more to that depth well this season, play maybe more 10 deep than you had the past 2 seasons.
Right.
That's kind of the approach there.
That's our thought. You know what I mean? I think, in the beginning of where we're at, we're going to want to see a lot of these guys out on the court. It's really nice to have a couple of exhibition games before we, get stuck playing Platteville in the first round. Thanks, Ron Rose. But to really see, hey, where does this all match up? And it's going to be a process. It's going to be, I think, a good month and a half before we can really figure out all the pieces and how they fit. But I'm excited about all 3 of those transfers. I think James Felton at 6'10" gives us some good size and length inside. Ty Horkey, man, you get a grad student that has 4 years under his belt and had a lot of success at Kalamazoo, helps a lot. Parker Schwartz comes in and will play some of the minutes that Marcus Bolt was at. And again, I think just from athleticism, length, another 6'6" kid. I mean, I think we have a lot of pieces, right? And that's what I'm excited about. The well is certainly not dry, but there's a big deal of trying to get all these guys to kind of gel, right? I mean, it's what you try to do as a coach, but we're still in a process of trying to figure it all out. Trust me, I think the older I get as a coach, I feel like the less I know, if that makes any sense. When you're an assistant, you think you know it all. And then, you keep on doing this for a while, and it's like, man, we're still learning. We're still trying to figure out what's really going to fit us.
Yeah, we're still in that early season, early practice zone, right? You're only dealing with the
Yeah.
guys maybe a couple times a week.
Yep.
Once the official start date hits, I think that's October 15.
Mhm.
You guys are going to be playing an exhibition game against Division II Ferris State, is my understanding, like a week after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you even go about like making a lineup in a roster when you've it seems like you've barely had gotten to work with these guys on the court very much?
Well, you don't, but I like it, right? Because it. You do get to the point where you really want to see, hey, what we're doing, is it really going to work,
Mm,
right? And how we're playing, is this going to fit? And there's still enough veteran experience too of guys. And we got a lot of guys that have played 60, 70
yeah.
games at Calvin. So we can rely on them a little bit, but also trying to tweak a little bit of what we're doing, and really try to do a great job of inserting. I mean, and don't get me wrong, it's like, I'm not a fan of losing to Andy at Ferris. I'd like to beat him here sometime, but these games are still, test of, hey, what do we look like? How hard are we going to compete? Where can we take this thing? And then a lot of really good film, and that's the one thing I love about these. Right? It's like, okay, now you have a chance to sit down with somebody and really talk about the good and the stuff that was tough and the things that you need to get better at.
All right, so a lot of unknowns, but a lot of names in the mix and a lot of
Mhm.
experience, right? A lot of
Yep.
guys who've played, whether at Calvin or elsewhere, played college basketball. So, it would be understandable if the answer was no here, but are there any freshmen that you expect to be in the mix, or other
Mhm.
players that we haven't mentioned that you're excited about heading into the season?
I mean, a couple of the guys, Mike Morris, who hasn't played that much,
Yeah.
but had a really, really good summer. Coming in at 6'5", another wing, I think that gives us a lot of energy. And then, probably two freshmen I think that have stood out the most are Ben Hegel out of Byron Center and JT McElwain out of Hamilton. They both kind of got college ready bodies already. And I think in time I think they're going to be really, really good college players. But there's only so many guys you can play too. So they know that hey, what we want out of practice every day, right, is everybody competing and trying to fight for a slice of something, right? And when we get to the locker room, everybody still loves each other and it's all good. But when we're on the court, we want you to fight. So, to have enough of those guys out there, and I really think those guys have stood out in these 8 practices of two guys that want to compete and want to see what they can do.
Now, what other name I'll bring up here, because I believe Luke Mishmerheisen he's currently playing football, but I believe was a basketball recruit as well. Is that still the case? And how's that going to work? I know that's a new dynamic to Calvin, with this being the first
Yeah.
year of competition for the football team.
Yeah, right. I mean, Coach Fig, he should give me some type of gift certificate to Taco Bell or McDonald's for that one. Because Luke came and worked out with us a few times. When our guys were doing open runs here this summer, and I talked to him and he's like, "Hey, is it okay? Because I really, man, football is something I really like to do and try to play both." And I'm like, "Hey, look, you only get to do college once, so go for it, right?" I don't think me or him or Coach Fig understood how impactful he was going to be on the football field. So we'll see after everything he's done this year. We'll see if he still wants to hoop or not. We would certainly welcome if he did.
Well, he's doing a nice job on the football field so far.
Yes, he is. He's been fun to watch.
All right, so you mentioned, you're glad you don't have to play a game October 16th or October 17th, but you do have to play one on November 8th, and there's no time for tune-ups. You already mentioned it. Ron Rose gave you a matchup there at the Sigma Invitational, Illinois Wesleyan with Wisconsin Platteville right off the bat. It's a non-conference slate that is very strong, as we've come to expect from Calvin basketball. But it's difficult not only for the names on the list here, but it skews towards road and neutral games. You've got the 2 games that you're hosting as part of the Great Lakes Invitational, and just one other D3 game at home aside from that. As we mentioned, you're going to be starting at that Sigma Invitational at Illinois Wesleyan, where you'll meet Platteville and then get the either Illinois Wesleyan or Cal Lu, the other 2 teams in that event, depending on what happens. Then the next weekend, you go to the Heidelberg tournament and get UW Oshkosh, and then the next night you'll get either Manchester or Heidelberg. And then, as we mentioned, you're hosting the Great Lakes Invitational, where you will play St. John's out of Minnesota and Emory. And as it seems that you do every year, we've got a Wisconsin trip, this time there to take on Oshkosh, which we'll be seeing for a second time in non-conference play. So an interesting dynamic there. And then you'll also play lacrosse, take a trip down to Ohio for Wilmington before finishing up non-conference play at home against St. Norbert. I guess first, just tell us your approach to scheduling in general, and then how you're feeling about this year's gauntlet.
Well, I'm a genius when it comes to scheduling. This is kind of what stinks. Well, number one, I committed to Ron that I was going to go play in the SICMA 2 years ago. He didn't quite let me know how stacked it was going to be, but once you commit to it, you're doing it. And then, you're kind of always trying to schedule 2 years in advance. So, last year we had an opportunity to get a couple of extra teams, including lacrosse and Wilmington, on the docket. And, we had to return those games. And then, I didn't realize when we signed up for the Heidelberg that Oshkosh was going to be our first round opponent. So that was a little interesting when that came out. And so it lined up not exactly how I'd have liked to line it up. But it is what it is, right? And I think the cool thing about this year is, I've always wanted to play in the SICMA. It's an amazing tournament. Heidelberg, that tournament is one of the premier ones that coaches love to go to, and it's so well run. To get the opportunity to have the Great Lakes here, that's just going to be an amazing, amazing weekend of basketball. I can't wait to have a lot of just not only exciting games, but be a part of that and have it at Calvin, which is really cool. But yeah, it's not easy, right? And I kind of set this also up like we talked about with the scheduling piece of the equation. And my goodness, we probably, if it were back in the old day, out of all those opponents, you could probably count on maybe out of those 11 games, 8 to 9 of them being regionally ranked, which now who cares? So thank you, NCAA. I appreciate it. So look, it's going to be fun. I mean, we'll be battle tested. We will understand what it takes to go on the road. And I think this is a team that we want to figure out how we can be playing our best basketball come end of February, beginning of March, and make sure that we're ready to go at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably feel like you have the team, the types of players last year, this year, hopefully next year. You're not going to benefit yourselves by playing too many games that you're going to win by 30. You're going to need to play these Wisconsin schools, CCIW schools, OAC schools, teams that you might see come March, right? Like you saw last year. And also maybe get some back-to-backs in. So some Friday night, Saturday night, you have to do that in the tournament. Do you see these early season tournaments, do they help prep you in March? Like, hey guys, remember when we had to play Friday and then again Saturday? Does that come into play all the way at the end of the season?
Oh, for sure. I think it does, right? It's really unique when you talk about the back-to-backers, right? And if you're in the Division I tournament, you always get the day between and you get the rest. But to mentally prepare yourself, if you've got like a hard-fought game on a Friday and then have to turn around in less than 24 hours and play again, it's a lot on yourself, and a lot as a coach, way more as a player, right? To just get used to that element. And I think if you're not doing some of those Friday, Saturday tournament type atmospheres, man, it makes it really tough when it comes to not only the NCAA tournament, but let's just be honest, the MIAA tournament, which is the same type of thing. So, I think it's super beneficial to get a few of those in. And to play high level competition is a big, big deal. There are certainly times you can schedule a little less, and maybe next year I'll do a little better job of that. But in the same breath, hey, we want to play the best. That's Calvin, right? And we want to be in and have an experience of our guys really getting to have unique opportunities, whatever they might be. And certainly this round is going to be a lot of that.
And it'll get you ready for league play, which I feel like the MIAA has been in a bit of a resurgence over the last couple of years. It still feels like there's that big gap between Calvin Trine and Hope, and then the rest of the league that maybe closed a little bit this past year. You look at Olivet; they were a 5-win team. One of those 5 was against Trine, who goes on to win the national championship.
Right.
I'm sure you would like to not have to remember your game at Olivet. I recall watching it from home. I know that I was in my family room and there were some emotional outbursts of both frustration and elation.
Yes.
But you were fortunate enough to leave there with a win. So but that's a 5-win team, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they were bringing it.
Yeah.
It seems like every game at Albion is a dogfight. So what's your perspective on the league? Obviously, people know about Hope, Calvin, and
Mm-hmm.
Trine at the top, but what's your outlook on the league as a whole coming into this season?
Every league season presents its uniqueness and its challenges. And again, this year, I would say, we'll do a poll and, try and, they just won the Natty. They're certainly going to be number one with the guys they have returning and the guys they brought in. Kind of between us and Hope probably is going to be 2 and 3. I think it's really unique when you talk about those 3 teams. Because I think over the last 3 years, those teams are just as good as any teams that you're going to see in Division III. And it's really cool in that I think I saw this about a month ago. The most well-attended games this year in Division III, Calvin Hope here was the number 1. Then it was Hope, us at Hope, Trine here, and then us down at Trine. So if you took the top 10 attended games, I think we had 5 of those. So that tells you kind of the MIAA and how cool that is, right? And how much of an interest it draws. But then you talk about those other games, and we had battles this year at Albion. Obviously, the Olivet game where, if you had some emotional outbursts, you should send me on the bench because there was enough emotional outbursts from me and the staff to last a couple of weeks. But every one of those games was tough on the road, right? And so I think that's the one thing is these other teams, and that's the great thing about it is, overall we had a winning record as a conference in the non-con last year. So this is a conference that continues to really get where it has to go. And I have seen kind of the transcendence of those top teams. And I think doing what Trine does with Brooks Miller and what Greg Mitchell does at Hope, it's almost kind of like, that Tiger Woods effect where when you have great teams like that, you better push yourself and make yourself be aware of what's going on and push your own team to get there. We're certainly in that thing where, we want to see and get what Trine has, and it was wonderful to beat them at their place. It's a great win, but, we want to continue to compete with both those schools because they're such excellent programs, all well coached. And I think that's the one thing in the MIAA is from a coaching standpoint, there's a lot of good coaches that really push you to your nth degree as far as what you can do and how you go about it.
Yeah, one of the last questions from me as we kind of wrap up here, just curious about how you and the team together kind of set your goals or how you're going to want to define success for your guys as a group. What are the things that you talk about around kind of what would make a successful season for you guys?
It's really interesting. So we do talk about winning because it's kind of what you're rolling with, right? And so, goals every year are, we want to win the MIAA, want a chance to win the MIAA tournament. We really want to beat Hope eventually twice and make the NCAA. So, the winning part is great, right? But what I love about especially Calvin, but all the way through coaching, right, is like, objectives are just as important. And it's like, that everybody that plays for us is going to have an amazing experience. I love to see the friendships that are here in the culture that we have, where, we just got done with team meetings here in the last couple of days, and to hear the freshmen talk about it, man, it's just so cool to see the juniors and seniors really accepting them, and taking them out for lunch and being a part of things. And it's like that those elements that have really nothing to do with winning basketball games are what really, I think, separates your experience that you're going to get at a place like Calvin and lots of other schools, I think, at the D3 level. And I think that's the one thing is, like, our guys certainly are just as competitive as everybody else that you're going to find at any level of basketball. But man, is it cool to see that, they continue to strive for, friendship, brotherhood, being a part of something that's really special here and representing Calvin and everything that they do. So, I think, sometimes we want it to be all about the dubs, and quite frankly, we're going to push ourselves as hard as we can to get there. But man, the experience itself is so much more than that.
It's interesting. Matt and I have had the opportunity to go to the Final Four the last couple of years, and have the media pass to sit there at the side, but then to go into those post game interviews, those post game press conferences, and that's one of the things that's really struck me is how consistent it is among these highly successful programs that they all talk about. Yes, the winning, but winning gets them that extra game, that extra day, that extra week to be together as a group.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not surprising to me to hear you echo a lot of those words that we've continually heard from different teams, different years, just about that opportunity that winning presents. Yes, they want to win, but it's almost like the winning is a means to an end, not the end itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was on Twitter. I saw it after the NCAA tournament. I think it was one of the Division I teams, and they lost, and there's a young man that's in front of the cameras, and they say, "What are you taking away from the season?" Everybody expects him to talk about the year and what they did, and he breaks down and he's crying about a couple of restaurants that they went to, right? And it's like, it's not the restaurant, but it's that time that they were together with a team, right? That connection, that love. I always think it's funny when the season's done and you talk to the seniors about what they enjoyed the most. A lot of times it's the trip or the fun stuff that they did. Like, it's a really funny story. We were down in Florida and we played Worcester down there in a really important game. And, our guys were in a big house and they ended up going and playing soccer at some indoor soccer place at like midnight. And trust me, after I heard about it, I was like, well, no wonder we played horribly against Worcester, right? You guys are playing soccer against each other till 1 o'clock in the morning. But the time they had, how much fun they had about it, I mean, it's just a memory that they'll have forever, right? And I think that's again what makes this whole thing so special, right? And these guys are going to be friends for a lifetime. And I get a small part in the 4 years they're here, but I can't wait to see what else they do with their lives too. It's really cool.
Well, we're very excited to see what you guys do on the court this upcoming season. As fans, we know how much anticipation builds up here in the months and weeks leading up to the start of the season. We get to start our silly little show up on a weekly basis. But what's it like for you as a coach? As it maybe the calendar turns to whether it's August or September, as that anticipation builds for the start of another season.
I am now going into what is it again? I think it's year 2023. I think year 23 as a head coach. And if you're not at this point, and I think this is when you're going to know it's time to hang them up, right? If you don't have some butterflies, and my wife always says it gets to be this time of year, and now I stop sleeping again, right? Where it'll be about 2 o'clock in the morning and I'll be restless and I'll just kind of, get out and start walking around. But if you don't have that, that excitement that, hey, the season's here once again, then you shouldn't be doing it. And I think that's the thing for me is like, you get through August and September, but it kind of start to turn the page a little bit now where October 15th on that calendar, it's go time. And I am really looking forward to, again, a new experience of, what we can do with this team and where we can go. So, yeah, it's awesome. This year compared to the year before, where I tell you what, offensively, we had a pretty good idea what we were going to do. We'll be throwing a lot of wrinkles out there and seeing what sticks, but that also is kind of exciting, right? And having an opportunity to really delve into some new stuff and play a little more up tempo. I think play a fun brand of basketball. It's going to be a great year.
Well, as Zach said, we're excited to see it. We really appreciate you taking the time today. Thanks for talking with us as always, and go Knights this year.
Absolutely. Go Knights. I know right here also, hopefully go Tigers. And always, Zach, go Lions.
Yeah, go Lions. That's right. Thanks, Bill.
All right, guys.
Matt, I was already excited for the season, but I'm even more excited now having gotten to talk to Coach Sall. Let's get on with it. I'm excited.
I know we're still here in October, but I think you and I are ready for D3 hoop season to start. Love what we're going to have for the season this year. Love that we have people joining us on this journey, supporting us on Patreon. Thank you to all these people on the screen. You help us keep D3Datacast.com ad-free. You help support us in being able to make these shows and just have a great season. So we're excited about that, Zach. You're excited. I'm excited. Let's have a good season.
Good job, team.
Great job, team.